Hello and welcome to the November 16th edition of the Gold, Ghosts, and Guns Short News. Sorry, I've been away for a little while. My name's Tom Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about. Today I want to talk about the turmoil in Israel. This is not a popular subject, or maybe it is a popular subject, but last week's hostilities between Israel and Palestinians in Gaza has shaken loose a lot of low-hanging fruit from the tree, as it were. A lot of things have happened relative to this, and I think it's important to try and get a handle on them. I will refer you to the excellent analysis by Bernard over at moonofalabama.org. Did great work decoding all of the things that are happening. I'm going to try and add to that a little bit, that analysis a little bit. I'm going to pay homage to it and add to it a little bit this morning. So let's get started. So the Gaza attack reveals just how weak Israel's position is. And this is something I've been saying for a while. This should be no shock to anyone who is following this closely. The Israelis do strike out in weakness. They do bully in weakness. It's a common theme that I run with here, that bullies are inherently weak people, and they're inherently and states that bully are also inherently weak. Should tell you where I think we're headed with the United States. Now, not to say that the United States doesn't have a tremendous amount of strength. It does, but it's using its strength in a very counterproductive way, which is in a very bullying manner, which is underlying just how weak it is. Because if we were confident of our position geopolitically, we wouldn't be doing the things that we were doing. We wouldn't be lashing out and threatening to sanction or sanctioning everybody who defies us on the smallest of things. So and I'll get to more of that later as we get to what Donald Trump's response to all this is. So the attacks, the conflict between Palestinians and Israelis last week prompted a ceasefire that was brokered by Egypt. And that ceasefire was met with derision at a minimum by the hardliners in Israel. It led to the resignation of Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman, and that's put a really serious hurt on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's options, right? Because we're looking at elections in Israel early next year, and Netanyahu is sitting with a very, very thin majority. The Likud party only controls 25% of the votes in the 120-seat Knesset. So, he governs with a very weak coalition. There's 18 parties in Israel, and it's the classic kind of cartel-style government where that happens when there's too much democracy, for lack of a better. When you have so many parties, and someone who winds up taking over doesn't really represent a great number of people, and winds up having to govern from the center and govern with an international eye more than a domestic eye. We see this with Angela Merkel. We see it in Spain. We see it all over Europe. It's quite sad. So Netanyahu's political career is in serious jeopardy. He's being attacked on all sides. Certainly, a lot of this is coming as a multi-pronged attack, I think, on the plan fomented by Jared Kushner, pushed by Netanyahu, Kushner, and behind the scenes Sheldon Adelson, to, as B would put it, over at Moon of Alabama, to split the Palestinians, their support, right, and have Hamas have basically the Hamas and the Palestinian authorities split. So you've got Qatar backing one side, you've got the Saudis backing the other. Obviously, the Americans, and this is the point, is to try and split the Gazans in half, and then the Palestinians in half, and then divide and conquer, effectively. That plan is dead with this ceasefire. That plan is dead because the response to the Israeli response, or to the Israeli incursions into Gaza, were far beyond previous capabilities, and it looks, for all intents and purposes, like, according to Bernard's interpretation over way, that the Israelis were the ones who sued for peace because they didn't want their reputation. One, they can't, when you're a bully, you can't show weakness. So they look weak in their response to this, right? And then two, it can't, their international reputation can't take any more of a hit. At the same time, the Saudis are under severe reputational attack by people who were supposed to be their friends, right? We're talking about the United States here, but we're talking about deep state factions within the United States who now see an opportunity to weaken Trump, who's building this coalition between the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. They see this as an opportunity to get control of Saudi Arabia by weakening Mohammed bin Salman, installing their guy back in charge of Saudi Arabia, and weakening the situation. Into this turmoil comes Iran. And Iran's, this is why, it's finally just kind of dawned on me as I was putting all this together this morning, this is why the Trump administration is so dead set on regime change in Iran, because the only way to secure Israel's future at this point is to continually try and put Iran on their back foot. This is why Netanyahu didn't want to see the Russians erect a no-fly zone over the western part of Syria, Israel, parts of Lebanon, and the eastern Mediterranean. That's why they didn't want to see S-300s in the area, because it made it impossible then for the Israelis to effectively defend themselves with the only competent part of their military, which is their air force. And with sympathy, I get it. I get the position. I'm not, arguing for or against that position. But the truth of the matter is that everybody involved on this side of the conflict, the U.S., Saudi Arabia, Israeli side of the conflict, have all overplayed their hand tremendously. And it was finally Putin's job to stand it down after the shoot down of the IL-20 aircraft, which led to the death of 15 Russian soldiers. Putin was put in the position where he had to appease hardliners. So, at this point, Netanyahu is looking like the peacemaker, which is kind of scary because I think the man's a war criminal. So the Kushner plan is DOA. The Gazans are not going to be wiped out. The Palestinians are not going to be wiped out by being effectively split under two different authorities. The Saudi Arabian government is in serious trouble. Now we've got defections in the United States government. This morning, and Rand Paul who's just following his natural libertarian instincts to end arms sales to reprehensible people. And now he's being used by Lindsey Graham and Bob Menendez to stop all arms sales to Saudi Arabia, which is a non-Trumpian position. What a shock. This is coming from the Senate Armed Services Committee. This is big. Because all these things are tied together. So very interesting how this is shaking out. And the big question now is, what does Trump do next? And if you look, you can see the hand of Israel behind all of the step-ups of financial pressure on Iran. I've been saying for months that sanctions, that hybrid war style stuff, sanctions ultimately don't work. They may work in the short term. You may get some domestic upheaval. You'll get some hyperinflation. You'll get all sorts of horrible things happening. Mike Pompeo came out last week and said, look, the Iranian governments have to choose between staying in power or allowing their people to eat. The man should be fired, right? He should just be fired for his Madeleine Albright moment. It's disgusting. This is where we are. And Donald Trump is now, at this point, completely morally compromised on every issue here. On every issue. He doesn't have a good answer. Doesn't have a good option. Well, he has one good option, but it's not an option he's likely to pursue, which is to pull everybody out. Meanwhile, so he's not going to do that. He's going to continue to ratchet up the sanctions regime against everyone until it no longer works. In the short term, next 6 to 9 months, maybe a year, you'll see the European Union ultimately go along with all of the sanctions against Iran. You'll see the Iranians pull out of the nuclear deal. You're going to see Netanyahu saber rattle even more about how we'll see more and more stories about how Iran is like this close to a nuclear weapon to scare American voters, especially in the run up to the 2020 election. Now we're into 2020 election. But if Trump wants to retain his base, if Trump wants to get himself clear of all of this, he's going to have to now reject the Saudi Arabians in a certain way and sanctioning the people who were involved in the Khashoggi killing using Magnitsky-style human rights violations justifications is a start. It's also terrible, but whatever. And then, but he really got to start thinking about what are you going to do in Syria. And they're trying to placate Erdogan in Turkey all at the same time, who's also pressing. So this whole thing is falling apart. Almost not exactly the way I thought, but it's going to force some form of grand bargain. And I said months ago that even the last year, I said if the United States and Israel do not stop pushing for more, they're going to lose everything. Hacks over the weekend have proven, one, that Netanyahu's correct. Iran has been smuggling higher powered weapons into Palestine, into Gaza, and into Lebanon. They've been successful. Airstrikes haven't stopped anything. Assad is still in power. French President Emmanuel Macron at the summit in Istanbul over Syria's future was the only one clinging to the Assad must go storyline. And now he and Trump are no longer in Dutch, right? Over Macron's remarks over the weekend about the U.S. and nationalism and everything else. I'm like, now what? No one likes anybody. Trump is a volatile guy who, if he doesn't like you, you're done. This is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. If Trump is smart and his political instincts are correct, he'll know that this is the time to start pulling out. This is the time to sue for peace. This is the time to make a deal, because the best deal that he's got on the table, that he's going to get at this point, is right about now. I don't know that he has that. I know he's a very tactical guy. He's not terribly strategic. He lives in the moment. Never apologizes, and he never looks back. See what he does. Because if he doesn't, all hell's going to break loose, and he's not going to survive re-election campaign. He might not even run for re-election. All right, you guys, this has been the Gold, Goats, and Guns short news for Friday, November 16th. If you like what you heard today, give a like and subscribe down below. You can also read my work over at goldgoatsandguns.com, and you can also sign up for my Patreon and support my work by becoming a member over Patreon over Patreon/Gold, Goats, and Guns for $4 a month. I do twice weekly market reports, as well as a private blog and a chat server on Slack, where we discuss amongst ourselves the issues of the day. And then for $12 a month, there's also the Gold, Goats, and Guns investment newsletter, where I tie all of this up into a coherent investment thesis. Guys, have a great weekend. You take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.